Okay, so before we tweak sim settings for the 10th time today, let's pause for a moment and talk about something pilots rely on constantly and heavily while flying the airplane, and that is indicated airspeed. Now, these videos do take some time and effort to record and edit, so I'd really appreciate if you would leave me a like on the video. And if you don't want to miss out on any of these kind of future videos, please make sure you subscribe to the channel as well. More than anything, it helps with my motivation to keep these videos coming. Now back to the topic. Let me start with a scenario. Imagine two airplanes flying at the exact same indicated airspeed, but one airplane is cruising just fine and the other one is right on the edge of stall. How can that possibly happen if both airplanes are showing the same speed? And the answer to this lies in what indicated airspeed actually measures. So let's understand this better so that we become better sim pilots. Despite the name, the instrument is not actually measuring speed directly. What it's measuring is pressures, and more specifically, it relies on dynamic pressure, and that quantity turns out to be extremely important because most aerodynamic forces acting on the aircraft depend on the dynamic pressure. So the key thing pilots need to know is not simply how fast the airplane is moving through space, but how strongly the airflow is interacting with the airplane. That's what indicated airspeed really represents. To measure this, the airplane uses something called pitot system, which 100% of you might have heard about it. So let's dig a little bit deeper. So at the front of the airplane, there is a small forward-facing probe called pitot tube, and as the aircraft moves through the air, the airflow enters this tube and is brought to a rest. This creates what's called total pressure or stagnation pressure. So pitot tube measures total pressure or stagnation pressure. Now at the same time, the airplane measures static pressure as well, which is simply the ambient atmospheric pressure around the airplane. And this is done using the static ports on the fuselage. Now when we subtract the static pressure measured by the static port from the total pressure, which is measured by the pitot tube, the result is dynamic pressure. Or mathematically, P static plus 1/2 rho v squared equals P total. That 1/2 rho v squared term is the dynamic pressure created by motion through the air. The pitot system measures this pressure difference and the airspeed indicator converts it into a speed reading. But there's an important assumption built into this conversion. The airspeed indicator assumes standard sea level air density when converting dynamic pressure into speed. Now in reality, air density changes with altitude and temperature. So as you climb higher, the air becomes less dense, and that means the aircraft has to move faster through the air to generate the same dynamic pressure. Hopefully that makes sense from the equation. For example, an aircraft cruising at 250 knots indicated at high altitude might actually be traveling at close to 400 knots relative to the ground. But the aerodynamic forces acting on the aircraft correspond to the dynamic pressure associated with 250 knots. And that's why pilots rely so heavily on indicated airspeed, because stall speeds, maneuvering speeds, structural limits are all defined in indicated airspeed. Since those limits depend on actual aerodynamic forces that the airplane is experiencing, and those forces depend directly on dynamic pressure. For example, if we look at the formula for lift, it is 1/2 rho v squared multiplied by the wing area multiplied by the lift coefficient. So you can see that the 1/2 rho v square, which is the dynamic pressure term, also exists in the lift equation. It is also present in the drag equation. So when pilots monitor indicated airspeed, they are essentially monitoring the aerodynamic environment the aircraft is experiencing. And that's why in aviation, indicated airspeed is a very critical number that the pilots rely on in the cockpit to assess the aircraft's aerodynamic performance and to also stay within the structural limits. So I hope that makes sense. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more of these, and I'll see you guys on the next one.